Good morning, members of the media, and thank you for joining us here this morning as we launch the 2020 Crime and Statistics Report for the Royal Cayman Islands Police Service. And just some opening comments. We released the report last night for your review in advance of the briefing here this morning. 2020 was dominated by the COVID-19 pandemic, and it completely changed our operating environment with restricted movement of persons and vehicles associated with shelter-in-place and curfew restrictions across the islands. The report we have produced sets out the incidents by number and types of calls that we received during 2020, and what you see across the report is a reduction in a broad range of crime classifications. I suppose a key outcome is that our crime platform remained very stable and very controlled during 2020. And for a successive year, the Cayman Islands remains a very, very safe place to work and to live. And hopefully, as we open the borders in time to come with the approval of government, we'll be ready to receive visitors and tourists to the island. To assist you in any of the questions you may have today, we have brought along some key personnel from the heads of our departments. So for sidebars for any of the main issues that you have. And if you're asking questions, because it's a 41-page report, can I ask you to refer to the page so we can all have a quick reference guide if there's a particular question you wish to ask. And we're here then, I think you know the panel, Deputy Commissioner Ennis, Deputy Commissioner Walton, Acting Superintendent Brad Ebanks, and Detective Superintendent Peter Lansdowne from our CID portfolio. So ladies and gentlemen, we're here to answer any questions we can and to assist you in understanding the report that is being published. Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning. Service, in case you didn't know. You say that crime is down, stable, whatever, but effectively for pretty much the best part of 3, almost 4 months, you were able to activate nothing short of a police state. It was like a policeman's dream in that you had a 100% curfew at night time and anybody on the street could be arrested. So if you take that into account, kind of pro rata, in actual fact, crime's probably up. And then also on top of that, you've had to deal with the thousands of cases of COVID crimes. So why do you think that is?
So if you examine the crime report and you see there were 4,281 crimes, 680 of which were COVID. So the figure is 3,601 net crime, net of COVID, which actually represents a 12.8 reduction on the 2019 figures. So I think we go back to what I had said during press conferences. We operated in partnership with the community during what we call lockdown or shelter in place or curfew restrictions. It was a partnership approach and it was a public health crisis. And I think the real figures represent a 12.8 reduction in crime across a broad range of categories. So I don't think that there's any concern that crime has risen, even taking the COVID factor into consideration.
There was towards the end of the year an increase in knife crime and violent crime.
Yeah.
And that now seems to be, I mean, it's hard to say because we're now into another year, but there seems to have been an increase again in gun-related crime. So do you see some correlation there that when that people are using knives instead of guns in this violence, or is it two separate issues?
No, so we expressed the concern later in the year, and I suppose as the economy started to open and the nighttime economy returned and became very active, we did see an increase in bladed weapons. And we also put in Operation Blade Runner for that. And that again was a partnership with the chairman of the licensing board, with the licensees themselves, with security personnel and additional patrols. And that basically brought it under control in terms of dealing with the bladed weapons. So going into 2021, we still have some concerns around the bladed weapons. We're not saying that crime has gone away. We still need to be very alert. None of us have become relaxed or complacent around crime. What we're doing is, I suppose, giving the figures of crime that occurred in 2020, but not forgetting what's happening in 2021. And we do have concerns as we go into 2021. We're 5 months into it now, we're in the 5th month, and we are dealing with a lot of crime.
A very separate section, which is the financial crimes, money laundering crimes, things like that. There's been some issues in terms of how that relates to our ending up on the grey list to a certain extent because of our failure to prosecute. So obviously prosecutions start with you guys.
Yes.
What kind of talent have you recruited or been able to recruit recently that specialises in that type of work? Because we all know it is complicated and difficult. But have you got people in specialist areas that for the vulnerable things, like apparently property is becoming a bit of an issue? Like there's a lot of people concerned that a lot of these properties that are being sold at the moment are covers for money laundering, and especially given the surge in it. Do you have experts in that field? Are you looking at these kind of things? Where are you focused?
Yeah, so thank you, Wendy, for that question, and I think an important one. So there have been a lot of developments since in 2019 into 2020, and we separated what was the existing financial crime investigation unit for domestic crime, and we established a new Cayman Islands Bureau of Financial Investigation, otherwise known as CIBFI. And today, and I'd invite you to a sidebar, we have Miss Victoria Templeman, a specially trained financial accredited investigator, the manager of the new bureau, and Detective Chief Inspector Barrow here, and they can deal with the new landscape that we're dealing with in response to the CFATF report. So a lot has happened in terms of recruiting specialists with the establishment of the new bureau and a complete strategic focus on all those major issues that have been identified in the CFATF report. And I'd invite you then to a sidebar to deal with Ms. Templeman and DCI Barrow as soon as we're finished here.
Thank you. Finally, can you give us an update on the current sort of staffing levels, like the numbers of officers, where you've got gaps, and how you propose to fill any gaps?
Yes, so we have announced a recruitment drive, and we hope to recruit by June. The date has closed. We're currently in the recruitment process as it stands. I do have to have some conversations with Deputy Governor, and we hope to recruit this year somewhere in the region between 30 to 50 officers this year. It would be our target, and that is a mix of new recruit officers and experienced officers. And you mentioned that covers our digital forensic hub for cyber forensic specialists, and also specialists to deal with financial crimes for the newly established CIBFI Bureau. So we're working on that. We would hope to see some momentum June, July, or at least towards the last quarter of this year, with new experts and new probationers or new students in the last quarter of this year.
So what's your current staffing level?
I'm at 400 officers, which includes 2 of the Coast Guard, and 117 civilian staff, so 517.
Have you hived off your what used to be Joint Marine Unit people then now? They've gone Coast Guard?
No, so it's still in its transitional stages. The Coast Guard bill is going through Cabinet. So we're running a kind of a parallel system at the minute where my Joint Marine Unit personnel remain with the Coast Guard until it actually transitions. And you'll be aware that 16 young Caymanian officers have completed the first stage of their training as Coast Guard recruits. That would have been announced earlier in this year. And we do hope to have a further recruitment class later in this year to recruit another between 16 and 20 local Caymanian.
That'll be separate from the police one?
Completely separate, yeah.
Actually, can I just clarify, when there is the proper transition and it goes completely, will the helicopters be one each, or will they stay as a separate unit that just serves both?
No, the helicopter will remain firmly under, I suppose, it remains under the Officer of the Commissioner of Police. I think, I'm not sure if people actually understand that, the new entity that was established by government on the 1st of January last year. So the Office of the Commissioner of Police, of which I'm the Chief Officer and Commissioner of Police, and I run the RCIPS and the Coast Guard under that entity. So the helicopters will firmly stay, but they are going to be an integral part of the operations of the Coast Guard.
Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Ralph,
good
good
to
morning.
see you again. I have one question in relation to the Blade Runner program. The blades that you referred to in your report, are they mostly machetes or knives?
Well, I think I can ask, I can say briefly, both, but predominantly knives, and we're concerned about the nightclub scene. So maybe Deputy Commissioner Rennis will talk about that as the strategic lead for Operation Blade Runner.
And second question is there a law that prevents people from carrying knives or machetes in their vehicles on the person? Can you elaborate, please?
Yes, I mean, you can find that under the penal code. That's an actual criminal offense in itself to carry bladed weapons at night, and you're found in the trunk of your vehicle at nights and parking lots. That's and has its own separate offense, which carries a fairly stiff penalty, greatly severe sanctions. But there's a separate offense just for having those bladed weapons, whether that be a knife or a machete, found in your vehicle at nights.
Thank you. My next question is for Superintendent Brad. Last time we spoke, you provided an update, or you had an incident regarding community activities. Can you provide an update, a brief update on what has happened since then, or is it still ongoing, and what has been the response?
Well, our CPD department has really been very, very active in going into the communities. They have launched a number of neighborhood watches, which I would like to say would have been a contributing factor in some of the low numbers in burglaries that we've been having, but a decrease. So we intend to keep that up over 2021, and hopefully that will continue to reap benefits.
Thanks. As a reporter, sometimes we, of course, get stories and they're sort of short on information. What's the policy regarding publishing photos of victims or offenders in press releases?
So, Ralph, I think it's something we have to manage very, very carefully. We have to look at due process in terms of when there are court proceedings. So we don't normally publish photographs. From time to time, we find it's a matter of last resort where we cannot locate a person that's sought. And that has been actually beneficial on at least 2 occasions earlier this year, where we just couldn't get information. We couldn't establish the location or the whereabouts of high profile targets. And by taking the decision, which is not one we take lightly, by publishing the photographs, we did receive information, very valuable information from the community, for which we're very grateful. So we're kind of reluctant to publish photographs, respecting due process and respecting all sorts of data protection issues that arise and challenges that can be mounted to photographs being published in national media.
Could I just jump in there? From an investigative standpoint, running the investigation teams, we find that there are sometimes inappropriate disclosures on social media by a lot of sources publishing pictures of suspects or potential people involved. And we as investigators still have identification issues and procedures that we have to follow, and publishing people's pictures very early during an investigation usurps our investigation and identification procedures. So we would try and emphasize and say, please don't publish photographs on social media, in news outlets, anywhere until we agree it, because if a witness sees that picture, it can compromise their identification procedures later. So we would encourage people not to publish photographs very early.
And I think it would be safe to say that there's a prohibition in publishing pictures of victims. I don't think that is something that we would do, and I wouldn't see any compelling reason to publish the picture of a victim of a crime.
Just have 2 more short questions. Commissioner, you mentioned that crime levels in Cayman is fairly low, and Cayman is still a very safe place to live.
Yes.
Is this all over Cayman? And secondly, do you see burglar bars being installed in the near future?
I'm sorry, I missed that last bit, Ralph.
Do you foresee burglar bars, preventative measures on windows being installed around the island in the near future?
It's a common phenomenon across the Caribbean where it is.
Oh, sorry, okay, something new to me. So what I'm picking up is a crime prevention measure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, this is about the partnership we're having with the community that Acting Superintendent Ebanks. We've held partnership training courses with private security firms. We promote crime prevention, home crime prevention, better alarms, better systems, better car systems. Don't leave property lying in your car visible for somebody to go around. Burglary has shown, this is the 6th year that burglary has shown a decrease. And actually for the 2020 figures has shown a remarkable decrease of near on 40%. And so far this year in 2021, we're showing a further decrease. And I did mention earlier, we don't want to become complacent or over relaxed about that, but we do think that homeowners are taking more responsibility. We think that our patrols have increased, are paying dividends. And we do think that our targeting of recidivist offenders has helped in terms of reducing the burglary rate. It's something we do have to keep a focus on. But I do stress that this is a really safe place to reside and to work in the Cayman Islands. And no matter where you look at the figures, it's borne out. This is a really safe place.
Okay, my final question, we're anticipating the open of the borders, getting back to life as usual in the near future, hopefully within the next couple of months. With that comes many other challenges, as
Yes,
we know.
definitely.
I remember when we
Yeah.
had a lockdown, things settled down a bit, but as we reopened,
Yeah.
and I anticipate that, of course, as the economy gets back on track, we're going to have certain elements in the community, given elements that surface. Are you prepared as a, is RCIPS prepared to handle whatever challenges will come in the future when the borders and things get back to normal?
Yeah, so good question. And by its very nature, policing is dynamic and you have to adapt to the environment, the changing environment. We're all the time as a command team looking at the environment. We meet several times a week to ask what is happening, what's likely to happen. So we look forward to the day the borders open and we receive air and cruise passenger, visitors, tourists to the island again. We managed it before, we'll manage it again. And we look forward to receiving those people back. And my sense would be that this should be a country, a destination of choice for people who want to come and visit and see what it is that we're doing. And we certainly look forward to that challenge.
Thank you very much for the answers.
Hi, gentlemen. How are you?
Good morning.
April Cummings from Radio Cayman. I don't have a huge list of questions for you today, but I was interested in your perspective. The police force is an entity, and you're human too, and that whole lockdown period and all of the things that went with it were challenging for everyone. How did the police service do, and how are guys and gals doing now?
So another good question and really important that wellness and right across the civil service under Deputy Governor, wellness was at the top of the agenda for the whole lot of us. And my Deputy Chief Officer, she's here this morning, Nancy Bernard, looked at it from our perspective, from a strategic perspective here in RCIPS. And at the press conferences that you would have seen us go through in 2020, we spoke about changing the tours for our officers, 4 hours on, 4 hours off, to build our own resilience during the protracted or prolonged operations for COVID. We relied on assistance from our colleagues in CBC, from work and our special constabulary. So we gave as much time as we could to our officers to make sure that they had that downtime. So that looked after, we hope, their family commitments and the rest that was required. So to deal with the other issues that occurred during 2019, there was an onus on us as the command team to make sure that the environment in which they operated was clean and sanitized and none of our officers were infected, or at least it wasn't transmitted, the COVID-19 virus itself. So we did a huge amount of work in terms of additional vehicles, sanitization of our estate, our custody detention centre. And as it turns out, we lost very little of our personnel during the COVID. And I think that's down to the work of a huge amount of people, including our Police Welfare Committee, who provided meals for the officers on the go who couldn't avail of meal breaks because they're on extended tours at supermarkets and financial outlets and doing patrols on far ends of the island. So our Police Welfare Committee were able to arrange meals to be delivered to them to keep them well. The sanitisation that was brought in and the working tours gave people plenty of rest. We're back now to a sense of, we're still minding some quarantine facilities and we still have a COVID enforcement team. We're making the best use of the resources that we have. And I think we have seen a level of normalcy return to our policing operations, and the environment is returning more to what we would have seen in 2019 and what we expect to see for the remainder of 2021.
Overall, how would you say so far 2021 is shaping up compared to 2020? Numbers, yes, but just kind of your perspective overall.
Well, as I said, there's a sense of normalcy. Traffic becomes a major issue for us. The vehicles are back on the road. Speeding is a major issue. I know it's going to be, discussed under the National Road Safety Strategy at the National Security Council. We're going to look at it. Driver behaviour is a cause of concern. As I said, speeding and weaving in and out. Traffic congestion is a major issue. The licensed premises are open, so assaults. Some of our real concerns, and I have Acting Inspector Dossier Scott here this morning from our MASH unit, are child protection and domestic violence, something we're really looking at and trying to get a real understanding of what it is. It's not that it's decreasing, it's a cause of concern to us. In fact, just the way in which it's going at the minute and how we're going to deal with it in partnership with all other government agencies or relevant government agencies. So I spoke earlier on about having to review our operating environment all the time and adapt. And that's what we're doing on a kind of on a daily and a weekly basis, adapting to the environment in which we find ourselves in. And as we receive our reports, and I'm sure for anyone that does a sidebar with Acting Inspector Scott, she would tell you that she is finding herself overloaded in the MASH unit with the number of reports they are receiving from both DV and child protection.
I was going to ask kind of if there are any sort of special areas of focus, for you and the team for the coming, I guess, the rest of this year. Are there any, other than what you've mentioned already, sort of areas of focus, things that you want to look at, pursue, change?
So because of the, I use the words global existential threats that exist in terms of cyber, crime in all of its forms, and the financial threats that exist that have already been identified, the growth of our Financial Bureau of Investigation, the CIPFI, and the growth of our Digital Forensic Hub are two of the areas that we see as pressing. One of the concerns or the challenges for us is the global squeeze on those experts. Everybody across the globe is looking for the type of expert, and you can't transition the traditional police officer into those specialist roles. They require a huge amount of professionalism and experience to bring to these roles, professional accreditation and training. So we're working hard on that, on the recruitment, trying to identify. But apart from the day-to-day policing challenges that we have to deal with, almost look and see what's happening on a daily basis across the island where the pressure points are occurring. We have to keep a strategic eye on what's happening in the growth of our Digital Forensic Hub and the growth of our Financial Bureau of Investigation.
And just finally, a check on the relationship with the community. I know that's been an ongoing journey. We missed some of our community officers during lockdown period. We've seen the return of that. How is that working as a program?
So and Acting Superintendent Ebanks has said it. I share the concern that we haven't had the meetings in 2020 that we had in 2019, that we lost some momentum. I attended a 3-hour meeting in Northside last Saturday, and it was made very clear to me and some of the officers, or one of the officers that was with me, that we missed the meetings and we really need to get them going again. I think that was an interruption, as I said, that was caused by COVID, and I would like to see them coming back again, because that gives a real voice to the community, and it also alerts us to the real issues that are occurring in the community. So I find them really valuable. I know the team, and I know myself and Acting Superintendent Ebanks will be heading to some meetings in the Boddentown, the Eastern Districts soon, and I hope that West Bay and Georgetown will start reconvening their meetings. We did lose a bit of traction, and I hope that we can get back on track.
All right, thank you all very much.
Sir, just for the benefit of the listening audience, just want to clarify that our work shifts are 4 days on and 4 days off.
Okay. Thank you, Jody. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning, Norma.
Just a few quick questions for you. The report stated that we'd seen a big increase basically in speeding and I think motor vehicle accidents last year. And I know you said, Commissioner, that this would be something that the National Security Council, I think, will be discussing as part of a national strategy. Can you elaborate a bit more on that? Are there any specific steps that are being taken to address the number of motor accidents in Georgetown specifically, for example?
Yeah, so Georgetown, and I suppose if you just look at volumes alone, you would expect it to have the higher ratio of accidents, of traffic accidents. So yes, it does. And actually the numbers reduced last year, but they're on the increase at the moment. And they reduced by virtue of the fact that COVID restrictions had reduced the volume of traffic on the roads. Although last year we did have 9 fatalities, which is a serious situation itself. This year so far, in the start of month 5, we're up to 3 fatalities. So we have concerns. Speeding is one of our major concerns, and we have strengthened our traffic unit insofar as we can at the moment, and we employ additional people on overtime on bank holiday weekends to resource it, because we have an increased volume of traffic. And our concern is DUI. drunk under the influence drivers attending maybe sessions in the afternoon on a bank holiday Sunday or a Monday. So we're very alert to that, trying to reduce it. We do see an increase in traffic accidents 2021 to date. So all of these things are being looked at in terms of how could we educate, how could we promote public awareness, and we all talk about the 3 E's as part of the road safety strategy, which is enforcement, engineering and education. How do we get those 3 blocks out, get everybody to buy into the concept that it's the responsibility of each individual driver to be responsible in a car. But what we're seeing, what I'm seeing, and I'm sure the other officers are seeing, and the reports that we are receiving, is that the driver behavior is pretty erratic. And that includes by some of our very large trucks on the roadway. So we have more to do in terms of traffic right across the island. And I think it's going to be a real focus as we continue through 2021.
Okay. Are you working with the National Roads Authority to put in place any kind of speed control measures?
Yes.
Or
Yeah.
you mentioned engineering, I guess it falls under.
Constantly with DNRA, speed bumps, speed signs, extra signage, and you will have seen additional signage gone up, the alerts, the digital signage telling you that in a 40-mile zone, you're reaching, you're driving in excess or under. And one of the points we tried to make is that the maximum speed limit on the island is 50 miles an hour, but that is not a target. You may only be able to drive at 30 miles an hour in a 50-mile zone, depending on the conditions. So for drivers not to assume that once it says you can drive at 50 miles, you should drive at 50. It's not a target. You must drive within safe parameters, and you must be a safe driver. And unfortunately, we're dealing with a lot of erratic driving on our public roads.
Is there any chances we're going to go down the road of having speed cameras whereby people can be captured on that and prosecuted based on that videos?
So a really big question, and Deputy Commissioner Walton has been working on it. It's something we have, but it requires a whole lot of government agencies to come together. And while it's relatively easy to put in speed cameras, there's a huge amount of infrastructure, networking and back office requirements. It is a really big project to bring in. And I do think that it will get attraction at National Security Council as part of the National Road Safety Strategy.
I'd like to touch on the issue of domestic violence. During lockdown, there was concerns that we were going to see quite a spike in that at the time, and we didn't really. Are there concerns that was simply because people weren't reporting it?
So I'll speak briefly to it. And I said, Acting Inspector Dacia Scott is here, and we can deal with that by way of a sidebar. We, in our strategic planning during the course of COVID-19, had anticipated we were looking at global trends and trends in the UK and across the BOTs. And it did indicate that we may see a spike here. We didn't see the spike. And our assumption then was when the schools reopened and the children went back, we would then see the spike through the reports, through the school counselling programs. That didn't happen. So what we have is what we know, but we certainly know that as we're in month 5 of 2021, we are really concerned about domestic violence and child protection issues generally. And there's more to be done, but it's a partnership. It's not RCIPS alone. It's a number of government agencies coming together and under the umbrella of MASH to primarily address those concerns.
I'd also just like to ask a question regarding ICT and cyber-related crimes. The report says that 49% of the cyber-enabled crime were to do with ICT networks, harassment, annoying, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And there was 109 recorded crimes. How many of those are actually prosecuted or might be making their ways through the court at the moment?
Well, I think I think that's probably an issue. We don't have the prosecution figures at the minute because to explain, you're probably aware it is leading and lagging indicators. So the time, and that relates to the time it reports to us, the amount of time it takes to investigate, if it gets to a prosecution, and then the conviction. So in those 4 stages, you have leading and lagging indicators. So we don't have the results, the outcome, to answer precisely the question you've asked. But what I have is our manager from the Digital Forensic Bureau, John Watson, and I think a sidebar with John will give you a greater understanding of what it is that they're actually dealing with at DFH and the trends they're seeing.
Okay, thank you all.
I hope that helps.
That offer.
Yeah.
And my final question, it's not regarding the report itself, but the expanded marine parks for Cayman, has that given the Marine Unit, now Coast Guard, a lot of additional tasks? Do you guys have enough manpower to deal with these expanded parks and deal with any infractions within them?
Okay, so again, that's going to be a complete partnership approach. The Coast Guard will be one arm of the enforcement, and there will be several other agencies involved. And as I spent my, as I said, a 3-hour meeting in Northside the other day, a lot of those issues were raised with us, and I anticipate a multi-agency meeting roundtable will be called to see how we're going to deal with buoys and markings, outer perimeters, inner perimeters, public access, speeding of jet skis, loud music on boats. We're going to see a whole lot of issues in terms of marine enforcement, and the Coast Guard will play a primary role or a prominent role in that, but with a number of other agencies.
Thank you. That's all for me.
Just unless the rest of the panel would like to say, if there's anything that any of the panel.
I would just like to add to what the Commissioner spoke on earlier of some of the most important things that we're looking at for 2021. Certainly for 2020, we had 9 fatal MVAs, and already for this year we have 3. So one of the things that I would like to work on this year is actually bring that figure down, and at the end of the year, if we can remain at 3, that would be a great accomplishment for us. So road safety is a high priority for us.
Okay, thanks, Commissioner. I think the Commissioner pretty much have covered a lot of ground, and probably what I would just say is that probably to contextualize things regarding, we talk about the pandemic, and yes, I think the pandemic with the suppressions that we had and the restrictions with movements of people probably contributed greatly to the reduction in crimes. But if you look at other jurisdictions, the reverse happened. Other jurisdictions have actually seen a spike in crime in certain major U.S. jurisdictions. I've seen spikes in crimes. So again, it's probably more to do with the environmental factors, and I think also down to the Cayman community, that we have a very strong community, a very law-abiding community. And that even takes me into the question that Ralph posed earlier about burglar bars. And I think that is something that we would not want to see, and most Caymanians would be almost offended, if I might use that term, to see burglar bars going up, even though people need to target hard in their residences and their commercial properties. And people are doing that because you have seen a lot more cameras been put in place. People are taking more initiatives in target hard in their residences. But burglar bars, these are just some of the things that are just unusual in Cayman. And if you look again in the global context of how things are happening, for example, we had an election and there were protests, but all our protests were peaceful protests. So I think these are some of the things we have to celebrate as a Caymanian community. And I think these are some of the things that Caymanian value. So these are some of the things that we want to work with the community and continue in partnership. I think looking ahead, once the economy starts to open back up, we not only, we talk about cybercrime, which is probably an emerging threat, but you're going to anticipate that there are going to be the domestic crimes as well. Once the economy start to open back up and people start to come in, not just your tourists, but workers as well. And I'm not saying that all workers that are coming in are, probably have a criminal inclination, but even just to throw this out as an anecdotal reference, 3 persons were returning to the island or coming into the island as new workers, and they were arrested by CBC, bringing in serious narcotics into the island. So we don't want to become, and we will not become complacent. We don't want to be too complacent and think that, okay, we enjoy the numbers that are, and should celebrate the numbers. The numbers are trending down even before 2020. We have seen the numbers trending in the right direction, and 2020 was also a year that they went significantly down. But again, anticipating once the economy starts to open back up, it's likely that we'll see other crimes. So we want to be prepared and be proactive. So that's just it from where I sit. But I think we have a lot to be thankful for and to celebrate as a community.
Peter?
I just wanted to emphasise what Mr. Ennis is saying there. It is a 5-year plan, really. I've got some of the stats. In 2017, we had 700 burglaries in a year. Last year, we had 150. That's a huge decrease. In 2016, we had 77 firearms-enabled crimes. Last year, we had 30. The year before, we had 27. It's a huge decrease in firearms-enabled crimes. Last year, we seized 5,000 pounds of ganja being imported into the islands. There were guns with some of those boatloads. We are doing very, very well, and I'm really proud of our guys. Last year, the landscape changed. COVID obviously had an effect. Vast majority of the detectives were back in uniform doing COVID enforcement. When the doors opened again, all the crime started again. We had Blade Runner, we had the knife crime, and the figures did increase. And we reacted, and we just changed the way we did things and dealt with those crimes. This year, things are changing again. Without a doubt, we've got issues around child sexual exploitation, sex offences in general, knife crime, and as Wendy said, that's slightly changed. We're getting a spate of gun crime. But we will change, we will deal with it. We've been very successful, and I'm sure we will in the future. I just want to emphasise some really good work from the guys. Thank you.
Any other questions, ladies and gentlemen, from our media colleagues? So, thank you very much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. Jody, you want to?
Yes, sir. I just want to close by saying a lot of the things that were mentioned in the press conference were community related as well as crime prevention related. And I just want to emphasize that on a regular basis on our social media and on our website, we do post based on trending crime, crime prevention, as well as our community related things. So please do follow us.
Are we good? Thank you, everybody. We'll close it off with that.
Thank you.
So I kind of.
Hey everyone, I'm Allison Mars. You're watching NBC News Now. Here's what's happening. A cybersecurity attack crippling the country's largest fuel pipeline. A Russian crime gang likely involved. So what are they after? Over on Capitol Hill, Kevin McCarthy backing Elise Stefanik to replace Liz Cheney as GOP conference chair. Voters in Cheney's home state of Wyoming turning their backs on her as well.
I think Liz Cheney needs to go. She does not represent the people of Wyoming. 73% of the people here in Wyoming voted for Trump. And she basically stabbed us in the back with, she felt it was the right thing to do.
And it's not just the GOP. We are a nation divided. Nearly 2/3 of Americans blaming social media like Facebook and Twitter. What else voters are saying in a new NBC News poll.